Welcome to the Cybersecurity Asynchronous workshop. This is where you're going to be able to work through at your own pace and kind of go through a quick introduction to a couple things here. The cybersecurity course, um, as well as the cyber.org range, as well as just some of these labs that we run on this. So kind of a schedule for today. We're going to take you through 3 different labs here. We're going to start with the credential harvesting lab. We like to start with a hands-on lab first, and then you're going to get an introduction to the course. So we'll run through that lab, kind of get you on the cyber range, run through or kind of showcase how these work, the range works, I should say, and kind of we're going to access 2 different machines and kind of have them talk and attack back and forth right there through a credential harvesting lab. Then we'll give the intro to the course and kind of an intro to cyber.org as well right there. Then you're going to get a brute force offline lab. We'll show you an example of a case study here. So we're going to run through the malware case study, which is great. One of our favorites here at cyber.org. It's a great little case study there. Then we'll take you through a web application attack with a SQL injection attack here. Then we'll wrap up and kind of give a survey here at the end as well. So at any time, like I said, you're going to be working through this at your own pace. This is a recording. You have any questions, do not hesitate to reach out to us. Our 2 emails are right here, so you can always come back in this video here and access our emails. And shoot us an email if you have any questions. We're more than happy to help out with that. Before we get started, though, there are a couple things here. This workshop will not work for you unless you have access to all the following. So I'm going to bring up this giant slide here. So here's everything you're going to need prior to this workshop. Okay, access to the cybersecurity course. So you do need access to the course itself. If you don't have access to the course, you're not going to be able to view the lab PowerPoints, the lesson PowerPoints, the case study PowerPoints there. That's the PDFs and all that stuff. So make sure you have access to our course. That's going to be at cyber.instructure.com. If you do not have access to that cybersecurity course, you can always go to cyber.org. That's our website. Our name is our website. And in the top right-hand corner, there's going to be a sign up button. That sign up button will get you access to cyber.instructure.com. Okay, so make sure you have access to that and you can log in. The second part is our range. The range is a different location than our curriculum. So that's going to be apps.cyber.org. That's apps, apps.cyber.org. If you do not have access right now, you can apply for access. Okay. There is a button there. I think it literally just says apply for access. Go ahead and fill that out. One thing I do want to note here is to get access to our curriculum, to get access to the range, it does take human verification. So use your teacher email account with your school. That is going to be necessary. You do have to be a K through 12 teacher, but it's completely free. We'll never charge for it. It's funded by federal dollars. But make sure you have access to both of those. So fill out both those forms. It will take around 24 to 48 business hours to get back to you on those. So if you don't have access to those, it might take a minute to get access to both the cybersecurity course and the cyber.org. Okay, so fill those out. The other thing, this is going to be automated here, is make sure you are registered for the workshop. So you can go to cyber.org/events. Look for the cybersecurity asynchronous workshop. That's the workshop that we're running right now. So cyber.org/events. We will run this a lot of times. Now, the workshop itself, the async workshop, is going to run for a certain time period. Know that at the cutoff date, the last date of this time period, whether it's December 31st or June 1st or something like that, just know that's when the PD certificates will be sent out, is at the end of that time period. So if you run through the workshop today, it doesn't end for another month, you won't get your certificate until the end of that month. So just know that's kind of how the certificates will be handed out for these workshops. But go to cyber.org/events. There'll be the link to take you to Eventbrite where you can fill out and register for this workshop. Now, one thing that we need, so you already have access to the video since you're listening to us kind of talk here, so you have access to the recording, which is great. But you do need to have access to the Google form. This is where you're going to submit all of your basically the stuff as you're working through the workshop. Basically, after you completed the lab with Bartles and I, you'll submit it via this Google form. Now you'll get access to that Google form after you register for Eventbrite. So go on Eventbrite and you will register. And now at the very bottom of basically the Eventbrite registration confirmation email, at the very bottom of that's going to be a Google form link. So click on that link. That'll take you to the Google form. That's where you're going to submit all of the stuff for today's workshop. Okay, we're going to have you submit screenshots. We're going to have you submit text, some different things in there, as well as the link to the surveys in there as well. So to get PD credits for this workshop, you'll need to submit that Google form. Well, you'll need to register on Eventbrite, submit that Google form, and then fill out that survey there at the end. Those 3 things. Goal is 90 minutes here. I think we'll keep you around 90 minutes. I think working with Bartles and I, this video is not going to be 90 minutes, so you'll have time to pause and kind of work on things on your own. So make sure you have access to all 4 of these things: the cybersecurity course, the cyber.org range, You do need access to this video, which you clearly have access if you're listening to me, and then also the Google form. Those are the four things here that you need to have here. So reach out to us if you can't access any of these, but we're prefacing this with stop right now if you don't have access to one of these because you're going to run into a holdup with that. So yeah, stop. All right, so back to the workshop. We're going to hit the ground running now. Once you have access to all four of these things, now we can hit the ground running and kind of work our way through this. So let me go back to our schedule for today. So the first thing that we're going to run into here is that credential harvesting lab, which I am going to walk you through, and then I'll also give you an intro to the course, and then Bartles will take you away with that brute force offline lab. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to go to the cyber.org range, and I'm going to go ahead and basically start this credential harvesting lab with us. So let me go on here to my web browser. Now notice here I am at apps.cyber.org. There's the apply for access button, but I'm going to go ahead and log in. So log into your account. So mine's just, we're using a teacher account that we have here. Log in, and you should see classrooms here. If you don't have any classrooms, you can go ahead and add a classroom there. You just need really one student, so really just a teacher account in a student if you want. But you can always add kids and do some other accounts. So here's mine with McAdam. I'm gonna go into my classroom here. And notice I already have 6 machines fired up here. So I had 3 different accounts. There's the teacher account, and then I have 3 students in here. And notice that 2 of these students, I've got their Kali Linux and Windows 7 fired up as well. This is just in case Bartles and I, for some reason, we run into an issue or we accidentally do something wrong and we break it, which I hope we don't do. We've done these labs enough. But if something like that happens, we have some backup machines already ready to run that we can kind of do. If you want to add some students, you can always, whoops, I did that kind of quick, but add that plus or add participants button up here, the little person with the plus. I'll just add 2 real quick. And you should notice that it added 2 more students here. And then if you're trying to fire up your machines, you can always do the launch VMs. The 2 machines that we're working with here is the Kali Linux. I'll just click select all. That's the 3 that don't have it. And then also the Windows 7 for today. So that Windows 7. So we're using the Kali Linux and Windows 7 for today. And notice there it's going to start firing up those machines. Give it about 2 to 3 minutes and each of those machines will be fired up. Once they're fired up, so if you don't have them fired up, pause the video. But once they're fired up, you'll see the 2 green lights. Go ahead and go inside your Kali Linux machine. This is where we're going to run with this credential harvesting lab. So I'm going to go in my Kali Linux. I'm going to actually click this button to kind of shrink the screen a little bit. And there we go. We're inside the Kali Linux machine. I'm not kind of given so the other labs will show you where they live on the course and whatnot, but since we're just jumping right into a lab, I'm not going to show you that right now, but we'll get to that here in a second. But this is the credential harvesting lab. If you're in the course and you want to open it up, you can. What is the credential harvesting lab? Well, it's going to be pretty simple. We're going to harvest credentials. Okay. I always like to say credentials are what? I mean, on my phone nowadays, it takes a picture of my face. That's the credential to log in. It can be a thumbprint on older phones, but the most common is just a username and password. But we kind of use. There's a lot of things now where we use MFA and things like that. But a very common one is just the username and password, and that's what we're going to harvest today. What do we mean by harvest? We're going to try and gather it. So as this malicious actor, we're going to try and gather as many usernames and passwords that we can of these users. Okay, and so we're going to try and just basically capture the username password and steal it from someone in plain text and see if we can't log into the system as them. So we're going to harvest these credentials. How are we going to do it? I like to say 5 things here. I always got to remember them myself. We're going to create a fake web page. So remember that we're going to create a fake web page. It's going to be a Google page. It's going to be a Google login. We're not going to build it. We're going to take it from template. So it's going to be a web attack through Google from template. I already said it's a credential harvesting attack. And then ultimately, what type of attack of this? This is a social engineering attack. So those 5 things: fake Google login page, that's a website attack then. From template, we're not going to build it. It's a credential harvesting attack, and ultimately a social engineering attack. Those are the 5 options that we're going to need here in a little bit. And you'll see why I'm kind of talking you through those here in a second, those 5 options. But so to start this, we are going to act like the malicious actor here, and we're going to build this fake web page. Okay, and it's done pretty easily. It's through a tool called the Social Engineering Toolkit, sometimes referred to as SET, sometimes SE Toolkit, really depends. But go ahead and click on this little black box up here. This is our terminal. So click on that, and here in a couple seconds, we should see that terminal open right there. It's kind of big on here. All right, and that is your Kali IP address. We're actually going to need that. And so if you see it right there, go ahead and write it down. Mine is 10.15 and then 9 and 150. Write your specific one down. You're going to need that. And I'll show you later how to get it as well. But write that down. Everyone should start with 10.15 and be 2 different numbers. To open up the social engineering toolkit, I'm just going to do a sudo se toolkit. That stands for Social Engineering Toolkit. Now, sudo, at this point in the course, you'd already know what sudo does. That's basically super user do this. It's giving it admin, right? Saying the administrator on this system can't open up this tool. Since we're going to fire up a web server, we do need super user admin rights to do that. And so that's where the sudo comes into play here. But sudo SE Toolkit, Social Engineering Toolkit, and you can hit enter here, and it's going to start to open up that toolkit. Okay, I think it's going to ask us a question here. Yep, here we go. Do we agree to terms of service that basically the last couple words there, you're only going to use this tool for lawful purposes? To agree to this, type a Y and hit enter, and that's going to let us into the tool. If you put no or anything else there, it's going to kind of kick you out of the tool. It's just basically covering the people who create this right up here. I think the name, yeah, David Kennedy, kind of covering him of, hey, you're only going to use this tool for lawful purposes. Now, from those 5 options, notice here the first thing I said was it, or I think it was actually my 5th one I said, but one of the things I said is ultimately this is social engineering attack. So notice our option 1 here is social engineering attack. So I'm going to type a 1 and hit enter. Our next option here, we are going to attack a website. Okay, so notice number 2 now is website attack vector. So that's a 2 and then enter. And then ultimately this lab is called the credential harvester. So number 3 here says credential harvesting. So 3 enter. And which is always kind of funny. That's because we just type 1, 2, 3. But going right here, we have a web template. Notice we are going to do this from template, and we're not going to clone a site or build our own site. We're just going to do it from a template. I said we're not going to spend the time building it. So just a 1 and then enter. And then here's the hardest one. So notice here, that is my same IP address, 10.15.9.150. That's what I have written down. That's basically just saying, where is all of these credentials going to go back to? And since we're already on this Kali machine, it just auto defaults to it. And so literally, you're just going to hit enter here. Just leave it as that. We're not going to change it to anything else. So we're just going to leave it as that one. So just hit enter. And then now, remember I said we're going to do a Google login page. Notice we could do Java or Twitter, but Google right here is number 2. So we're going to do a Google. So I'm going to hit 2 and then hit enter. And that's as simple as that. There's those 5 options I told you. It's as simple as that, though, to set up a fake Google login page that we're going to try and get people to basically access this. Okay. The tool itself is easy. Where is this hard in the real world? We have to trick that other user into opening up this page and actually entering their credentials. So 2 things here: not only opening the page, but they also have to trick them into typing in their credentials here. So I could send an email if I'm trying to trick Bartles here. I can send an email to Bartles and be like, "Hey, Bartles, you need to update your Windows system or update your Google account." And then it has some malicious link or whatever. We could try and disguise that link if we want. However, we're playing both the malicious actor and the victim here, so we're not going to spend a ton of time trying to trick that victim into basically down or clicking on the link and entering their credentials. We're just going to go do it and see what it looks like. Okay. And so the way that we can get to basically a web browser that we can access this website is we're going to go to the Windows 7 machine. So I click that little button. I'm going to click other machines here. Now, before you go, make sure you have written down your IP address of this Linux machine. We already did that, but once you click other machines here, you should see the IP address right here again, 10.15.9.150. Just double check that that is the IP address that you have written down. And then once you have that IP address, go ahead and click connect to your Windows 7 machine. So I'm in my Windows 7 machine now. Once inside of this, go ahead and open up whatever flavor of web browser you want. We got the Internet Explorer down here, and we've got Google Chrome down here. I'll open up Chrome. Let's just open up one of those web browsers, and we're simply going to go to that IP address that we have written down, and we're going to see what this web page looks like. Okay, so I'm in the Windows 7 machine. I'm opening this up. I'm going to go to 10.15. Now my number I had here was 9 and 150. I'm going to go there and notice once I type in that IP address, all I did was type in 10.15.9.150. So that's your IP address of your Kali machine. Mine was 10.15.9.150. And it looks like, hey, we're trying to log into Google. So let's say I'd sent Bartles a text to his phone that said, hey, Bartles, go update your Google account or log into Google to look at this little video I have. And so he clicks on whatever malicious link I have there. It takes him here. So now we're trying to trick him into entering a username password. So what I'm going to tell you here is I can promise you that we don't save your username and password, but I still recommend you don't actually put in your real username and password. So put a fake email, put a fake password here. So I'll go ahead and put Jonathan at gmail.com. Sorry for the person in this world that owns that email account, even though it's not going to be real. And I love Panda Bear, so I'll just type the password of Panda Bear in here. Okay, so Jonathan at gmail.com, and I type Panda Bear. And I'm going to go ahead and click sign in. So I entered a fake username password. I don't care what you click here. You can click save, never, I just exit out. But it takes us to Google. But notice, we're not even signed into Google. We're not signed in. So nothing happened. That web page did absolutely nothing. As the victim, we're like, oh, well, that was dumb. Like it didn't take me anywhere. We're just kind of sitting here. But what we can do is we can go back to our Kali machine. So I'm going to click other machines and go back to my Kali machine. And what we should notice over here is now I have, hey, there it is. Email found. The email is jonathan@gmail.com. And there's the panda bear for password. We've captured that credentials of that user. Okay, so what you're going to do here is, so in the Google form, you do need to have this screenshot of this. So make sure, I should have told you to use your name, but whatever email and password that you have put in here, make sure to take a screenshot of that. So on a Windows, you can click the Windows Shift S button to kind of take a screenshot. And then if you're on a Mac, you can do Command Shift 4 and then select a portion of your screen to take a screenshot. But what we're looking for here is basically a screenshot of this this terminal here, especially the username of the email and password of whatever you typed in there as the fake email and password. Okay. So send a screenshot and send that into that Google form. So you can always take the screenshot and then save it, and then you can upload that photo into the Google form right there. Okay. If you're having troubles with that, email us and we can try and help you out with that. But screenshot of that. So that's what we're looking at. So this is the Credential Harvesting Lab. One thing we like to do is an extension here if you're in the classroom is so my machine, this isn't going to work when you're watching the video, but the range is sandboxed by classroom. So what you can actually do as a teacher is if you have this up on the like the board up front, you have the screen or whatever projector, however you have it up front, you can always have the kids go to your Kali IP address from any of their machines, and they can go to your, like I said, open a web browser in any of them. It can be the Windows server, it can be the Ubuntu machine, whatever you want to go into, and they can open a web browser, go to your Kali IP address here, and they can start typing in their emails and passwords, and they'll see them all start to appear on the screen up there. So kind of a fun activity to kind of have them see that. So that is an option for you to kind of do there if you would like. So now to shut this down, so the web server is running right now. To shut this down, notice it says Control C. Now we do need to be very specific with that because if we do something else, this might mess with a lab later on. And I'm sure Bartles will remind you to also shut this down properly because if not, the SQL injection lab might get a problem running into it. So what you're gonna have to do here is hit Control C, so Control and C, and that's gonna shut it down. I'm gonna press Enter here. It does save all the passwords in a thing here, but I'm just gonna hit Enter there. And notice here now it takes me back to here. So I was a Control C and then Enter, and I'll type 99 to return to the main menu. And then whoops, I just keep hitting 99, and there it is, 99 to exit the social engineering toolkit. So 99 all the way through, and then that'll take me out of there. But what we're going to do now before we go on to another lab is we're going to give just a quick intro of the course. I'm not going to spend a ton of time. I encourage you to go through and work your way through or look through the course and try and find things, but we're going to kind of see where this lab came from and how the course is laid out. So I'm going to actually go to our course. That's going to be that cyber.instructure.com. And if you're on the dashboard, it's going to actually be that course that is just titled cybersecurity. Internally at cyber.org, we refer to this as our technical cybersecurity course, but this is the cybersecurity course with just the name cybersecurity. Once inside the course, notice it now lands on a unit order. I like to show that here. So unit 0, 1, 2, but in a way that you can start from the top and go to the bottom. But what I'm actually going to go to is the CompTIA Security Plus objective order up here. Okay, I'm going to click on that. And this is going to take us to an order where it's all by the CompTIA objectives. Kind of show how the course is built and whatnot. So in here, um, just know that the entire course is aligned to the CompTIA Security Plus objectives. Now, whether or not you end up having the kids take the Security Plus at the end or not, that's totally up to you. I think over 90% of the teachers who use this course, I don't actually have their kids end up taking the Security Plus at the end. And if you only want to take one thing, you only want to take that Credential Harvesting Lab from this course is built modularly where you can pick and choose what you want to take from the course. So just know that that is an option as well. What I like to show here, so let me actually Control F for credential harvesting. There it is. So it looks like 118 over here is the credential harvesting lab right here. And notice that lab is aligned with that credential harvesting. But let's take a look of why it's 118. Why is that? I'm going to download these Security Plus objectives up here. Right there. I'm going to open that up. And notice here, let's go to objective 1.1. Here it is. Compare and contrast different types of social engineering techniques And notice in here, there is credential harvesting right there. So there's a lot of things in here. Is the principles of social engineering. We've got phishing, smishing, phishing, all those different ways to say phishing these days. Shoulder surfing, impersonation, hoaxes, different things like this. Um, a lot of these, like phishing and credential harvesting, those are in a typical high school cybersecurity classroom. But something like an influence campaign or a hybrid warfare, that might not be in a typical high school classroom. And so if you don't want to do that lesson. You don't have to. You can just pick and choose the phishing lesson, the credential harvesting, or whatever you want to do. And so that's kind of why we built it modularly. We've actually taken these CompTIA objectives and we've broken it up into 155 different lessons, and then we go through and number it. So notice 1.1, the first two numbers come from the objective number, which is 1.1, and then the 8 is just the eighth lesson of the 1.1 objective. So going back here, we've actually broken up the 1.1 objective into 14 different lessons here. Notice there's the influence campaigns, we got principles of social engineering, all those different words, hoaxes that we just saw, but here is the credential harvesting one. And then notice every lesson, so all 155 lessons are going to have four things here. They're going to have a teacher notes, they're going to have a PowerPoint, they're going to have a guided notes, and they're going to have a quiz. So if I click on the teacher notes, it will download it here. This is going to be a PDF format. Now, this only has one sub-objective, so it's going to be shorter than most. But notice here, we explain what a credential harvesting attack is and then how to defend against it. So basically, we quote-unquote rewrote a book here of explaining every single objective in a teacher note format here. We call these teacher notes, but by all means, if you give them to the kids, give them to the kids. It's really up to you, whether you print it off, give it to them as PDF, whatever you want to do here, but the teacher note is available to you. Okay. To go hand in hand with that teacher notes is a PowerPoint. So if I click on this, it's still loading. Here we go. There's that PowerPoint at the beginning, but if the PowerPoint's going to open up here we go. So here is the lesson itself. So we have just real quick, it goes hand in hand. So the teacher notes long and um, a longer version, long-winded version, and then the PowerPoint goes hand in hand in it. So you can have a short and condensed version here. Here's an example of one, and then here we go, how to defend against it as well. Those teacher note and PowerPoint are meant to go hand in hand. And then the third thing that goes hand in hand is the guided notes as well. Whoops. Well, I'll leave the answer key out. I opened up the kids version, but just notice here is short response answer or questions that you can give to your students to kind of have them start to just basically reach those teacher notes that you said, or basically what the objectives are for the Security Plus here. Up to you. You can have the kids use these alongside the PowerPoint, use them alongside the teacher notes, give it to them for homework that they go home and have to answer. It's up to you. But the guided notes are there. The one with the key will just have the answers in here for you as the teacher. And then finally, the quiz. Now, these are going to be questions. Now, this is one sub-objective, so this is going to be a short one, I bet. Oops, it opened on my other screen. Give me a second here. Still thinking about it. Open. Here we go. And notice this one only has 4 questions here, but just some questions that you can use. Quiz at the end of the kind of a spot check at the end of a class period. You can do it as a save them all up as a unit exam, however you want, but just some questions. These actually average 10 questions. This is a shorter one because it only has one sub-objective. But if you do the math there, 155 times around 10 questions per comes out to just over 1,500 different questions that you have for this course to kind of use with the kids. So every lesson has those. So a teacher notes, a PowerPoint, a guided note, and a quiz. And the other 2 things here, and I'm going to skip case studies for now, so we're going to get to those in a minute, are these labs and case studies. And these labs are what we just ran through here. Let me go ahead and open up the credential harvesting one. Now I know we just went through the lab, but let's see what the actual PowerPoint looks like for this lab. So if I open it up, notice here we go. There's this SE toolkit. There's finding a IP address. We kind of did it a different way, but that's fine. Here's inside the toolkit, but we have all the steps to kind of walk through this. Going in, there's the fake Google page, and then we can see the fake response there as well. So this lab kind of walks you through as a teacher, and then we talk at the end of how could they defend against it. How does 2-factor here? How could this save it? Even if they have your password, it doesn't even matter, and different things like that. But taking the lab to a different kind of level there, just adding some things at the end there. But this is the labs. They come in this PowerPoint format. And the last thing I'm going to show on the course, like I said, we'll get to the case studies in a bit, is this is the CompTIA security objective order. This is going to be in that order. But if you want the course, a lot of feedback we got was we actually want it in unit. If I want to teach it from day 1 down and not like the CompTIA order, which makes no sense for a high school classroom, how do I do it here? So notice here we take lesson 4.1.2 first, which is just simple Linux commands. And that's our first lesson. So there's Linux 101. And I believe in Unit 6, we'll have this credential harvesting lab. There we go. Lesson 1.1.8, and there is credential harvesting. So this actual lab that we just did doesn't come into play until Unit 6 of this course if you follow our unit order. Okay. Once again, this is just a suggested order in the end. You don't have to follow this order. You can use it however you like in your classroom, but all this stuff is available to you. There's the lesson plans up here that you can always look at. That's going to be for the entire unit, kind of showcasing that. I think that might bring in videos and teacher notes as well, different things like that in there with the kids as well. So kind of some good stuff here, but this is going to be the quick introduction to the course. Any questions about it, any concerns or anything, don't hesitate to reach out to us and ask about it. But this is the basic breakdown of this course. What we're going to do now is we're actually going to go back to the range here, and I'm going to pass it over to Bartles here, and he's going to take you through second lab of this workshop. So Bartles, I'll stop here, and if you want to share your screen.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you very much. As Joe had mentioned, we're going to be running through this brute force offline lab. So if you do happen to do a Control F for brute force, there's also a brute force online lab. So make sure that the one that you're referencing is the brute force offline, aligned to lesson 1.2.11, the password attacks. We're going to be using a tool called John the Ripper. In industry, you may hear it as just John or even JTR for the initials. Depending on the usage, you could call this a password cracker if you're using it maliciously, or a password auditor if you're using it like the role of IT testing the strength of passwords for your employees at a company. Regardless of how I'm using it, it ends up being used the same way. Now, back in our Kali Linux machine here, if we're still at this point where we had exited the social engineering toolkit, notice we don't see the prompt yet. If you just hit Control C, it can get us out of that back to the Kali at, and then your IP address. If you want to, you can even just close out of the terminal itself and reopen a new one. You could type clear just to start with a nice clear terminal. The important thing is we're not in the social engineering toolkit anymore. Getting started with this JTR tool, what we're going to do is create some users. Then we will be assigning passwords to those users. And I'm going to set 6 specific types of passwords because by default, JTR has 3 steps that it kind of runs through when it's trying to crack passwords. And we'll have 2 fall to the first set, 2 fall to the second set, 1 that will fall to the third set in about 5 to 10 minutes, and 1 that, even though it's actually a weak password in the real world, and if you were using modern tools and set JTR differently, it would fall very quickly. It won't fall in the time that we allow it. I am going to zoom in just a little bit in case you're using a smaller screen like a tablet or a phone to view this. Wouldn't recommend a phone because you need some sort of keyboard to be typing in the range, but that might be a second screen for you. As Joe had mentioned that sudo command before, we need super user rights to be able to add users to our system. The command to add users is user add. And I'm going to make a little fun of Joe and I at the start here. So we'll add a user Joe. So sudo user add Joe. Being a little lazy with Linux, you can use the up arrow to bring back the previously typed command rather than having to type out sudo user add again. And I'll add myself, so sudo user add John. And we'll add a few more users here. I'll have a sudo user add Charlene, sudo user add Linda, sudo user add Brandon, and sudo user add Willie. If you want to change any of those names, you're absolutely welcome to, because when we get to a point where we ask you to submit a screenshot, having some uniqueness there lets us know that it was your individual screenshot and not just a copy of ours. So if you wanted to, instead of make fun of Joe or myself, you could change one of those first 2 usernames. But the important thing is we remember these 6 users that we've just created. Now we need to assign some passwords to these users because the only thing we've done currently is just create the users. There's no password required, so I could switch over without a password. The password command, as it sounds, is password, except there's no O or R, so sudo passwd, and then the user whose password we want to assign. So we'll start with Joe. Joe's password is going to be the same as his username. So if you happen to use your first name for the first user, make sure the password is the same as your username. So for Joe, it will be Joe. And as long as we have typed that same password correctly in the retype, you'll get this password updated successfully. Again, I'm going to bring that previous command back with the up arrow so I can assign a password for John. Here, I'm going to set John's password as John and then the number 12, not the word 12, but the number 12, 1, 2. And just to show you what would happen if we have a typo, I'll make a little error here. So if you do happen to get this authentication token manipulation error, that means there was a typo. It didn't actually save the password. So we can re-enter that command and then correctly type in John 12, John 12. If you used a different user for that, just make sure that the password is that user followed by the number 12, because we want these first two passwords to be matching with the username in a certain way so they fall to the first part of the JTR tool. Our next user was Charlene. So sudo password Charlene. If we think about when we've got those data breaches and a list of commonly used passwords, we've got things like password 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We'll also have things like movies that are popular and current. So with Charlene, we're going to make her password Harry Potter, all one word, all lowercase. So Harry Potter. Harry Potter, again, all one word, all lowercase. Linda, we're going to use the same idea, but instead of Harry Potter, we'll use Star Wars. So Star Wars, all one word, lowercase. Then we have two more users. We have Brandon and we have Willie. Brandon's password, if you have a full keyboard or a 180 keyboard where you've got the number pad on the side, it's going to be that first column on the number pad, 147741. If you have a 75% keyboard, a 65% keyboard, one of the compact ones that doesn't have the number pad, it might look a little more random, but that's where this 147741 is coming from. So 147741, 147741. And finally, we'll set a password for Willie. Again, in the real world, this password would fall within 1 second. But by default, the way we have JTR set up on this machine, it's actually not going to fall in the time we give it. We're going to have a password that is password, but in leet speak. That's where they use like numbers and symbols in place of letters. We'll have a capital P for password, $signs for the S's, and a 0 for the O. So that's a capital P, A, $W, 0, RD, capital P, A, $W, 0, RD. So if you write that down on a piece of paper and actually see it, it kind of looks like password because of the dollars and the zeros. That's what they call leet speak. So we've assigned these 6 users with 6 passwords. On the system itself, the information about passwords is not stored in plain text. It used to be in a file called password, obviously not very secure. Now we store this information in a file called shadow in the etc directory, and it's not in plain text, it's in what's called a hash, and we can view the contents of that shadow file with this sudo cat root etc shadow. I didn't type root, but we're starting in the root directory. That's kind of indicative of that first / there. So it's red sudo cat root etc shadow. And if I hit enter, we've got some word wrapping here, so it doesn't look so neat and organized, but we can see Willie, Brandon, Linda, Charlene, John. And if I scroll up a little bit, I see Joe, and I see a lot of information here. Got $6 with each of these. I've got another, what looks like a random string of characters for each user between the second and third dollar. And then after that, up until that colon there, we've got another long random looking string of characters, which is known as the hash. The $6, that's just telling us which hashing algorithm is used. We're not going to go into too many details here because that's more in line with our passwords lab. So if you want information about what all that is, you can get that from the passwords lab. We're going to make a copy of this shadow file because you don't really want to mess around with the shadow file in Etsy. You can actually corrupt the system. When Joe and I will run these workshops live, we'll sometimes mess around with the file directly, but the lab itself actually has us make a copy, so we'll follow the lab here. The copy command is cp. Again, we're making a copy of this shadow file, so we have to specify where it is in the file system. And we're going to make a copy onto the desktop. So I'm typing out root home Kali desktop with a capital D. We haven't mentioned this because this is more in line with the Linux 101 and Linux 102 labs, but this is case sensitive. So if you try to type desktop with a lowercase d, you're going to get an error, or it might just create a copy of shadow titled desktop in the Kali directory, which is not what we want. I hit enter, and visually I see a copy of that shadow file appear on the desktop with a little X here. The reason why it appears with that X is I currently don't have permissions as Kali to be able to edit that file. So let's navigate to the desktop in our terminal here. So cd desktop with a capital D. And to change the permissions on the shadow file, we use the change mod, so chmod command. And we could be a little more specific, but kind of the panacea, the cure-all for everything, give everyone all read, write, and execute privileges is 777. And then the name of the file. So sudo chmod, change mod, 777 shadow. As soon as I hit enter, that X disappeared. So now as Kali, I have the ability to read, write, and execute that file if it happened to be an executable. To run the JTR tool, it's simply John, and then the name of the file itself. So John shadow. We'll hit enter here. And if you recall, like I said, we had chosen 6 passwords very specifically because of the way John is set up. Almost immediately, Joe and John 12 fell. So Joe's password and John's password fell to this first part of this attack here, because what JTR does is it checks the username and it sees if the password is also the username or the username with a numeral appended at the end. And I'm not sure if it checks from 0 to 99, 0 to 999. It obviously doesn't check everything forever, but we know username 12 falls very quickly. After it's tested the remaining users on this system to see if they'll fall within that type of attack, it moves on to the second portion where we can see this proceeding with word list. So that's referencing a dictionary attack. A dictionary attack, it just uses a list of known passwords that are commonly used, like password, like Star Wars, like Harry Potter. So we can see Charlene and Linda's password fell very quickly. And we also see a different color coding here. The root user on this system has a password of password, which is why that fell. We could check to see what passwords the JTR tool was currently testing on with a press of the space bar, but we're not going to do that here. If we were to allow this to run for another 5 to 10 minutes, which what we request you to do is allow that to happen, because we want a screenshot when this moves on to the third part, which it will say proceeding with incremental ASCII, and we'll see Brandon's password of 147741 fall. We want a screenshot of all that information. So your first two users that had username, password the same, and username, password with 12 at the end. Then users with the passwords Star Wars and Harry Potter fall. And then that password of 147741 fall. So that's the request there, is to get a screenshot of those technically 6 passwords, because it also has root password itself. There is an additional slide to the brute force offline lab, slide 14, which once you have completed that portion of the JTR tool and stopped what it was doing, because it will still try to find that password, spelled password in elite speak, you could move on to the second portion, but we're not going to do that in this workshop. We're just focused on this portion of the attack right here. When you get to that point that it has moved on to proceeding with incremental ASCII, what we can do is exit out of this. So we don't want to exit until you get to that point and take a screenshot. But once you've gotten to that point, we can stop this similarly to how SE Toolkit was stopped with a Control-C. So make sure you don't hit Control-C until you see that 147741 fall, so you can get a screenshot. Once that's occurred, Control-C, and we can get this stopped. Are we ready to move on to our malware case study, Joe?
Yeah, so we're gonna if I get my right screen here we go. We gotta take over, and it's gonna look like exactly what Bartles was showing you. But yeah, leave this running, because we'll get the screenshot. And if for some reason it doesn't get to the other one or whatnot, just send a screenshot of what you have here. But some of these passwords fall in here, so we do ask that you wait for that 147741. But if it doesn't get there, just take a screenshot of what you have and put it in there for that one that we're able to. Remember, that's a Command Shift X or Windows Shift S on a Windows machine, and then that's going to be a Command Shift 4 on a Mac machine to be able to basically take a screenshot of this. So, but going back, we're going to talk about a case study real quick, and I have it opened up. So back on our course here, notice in Unit A, Lesson 121, malware. We do have this case study on malware. Go ahead and click on that and download it, and you'll have the whole case study. I think it's only going to take you a couple minutes to read, but I'm going to open it up here. It's great case study on the Marcus Hutchinson case here. A lot of good articles about it. We found this one that looks to be about, probably with this header, about a page long is it. But you can kind of read through. It's a real quick introduction of what happened with him. I mean, the story itself goes really long. Read through it, but this is how a case study works. We're going to have an article up here that the kids can read, and then kind of a page for the teachers down here. So here's a summary of it. And so just in case you want to go through and just read the summary, or you read it last year or something as a teacher, you can read the summary real quick. We do give some questions here. These are what you're going to have to answer and submit on the Google form. And then if you want to look further into this, you can always go to the further study down here with it. So, but read through this. So what we're going to ask you to do here, or I guess I should say, how you implement this in your classroom is really up to you. Some teachers give it to the kids as homework, where they have to just go through and answer those 4 questions. Those questions are not going to be black and white answers. We try to hit that gray area where basically, like, should it be legal to create malware? Some people think yes, some think no. There's no right answer here. So just get the kids thinking here with it. But some teachers give it as short response, homework questions, have the kids read the article, answer. Some teachers actually have the kids do a debate, and they'll get up in front of it. When we run our workshops, we have the teachers, or in person, I should say, we have teachers debate it. Sometimes they get heated. We kind of play referee there, and just make sure that you kind of set the ground rules if you do run a debate within the classroom. But all sorts of ways, we just give the questions there with it. So what we're going to ask here is, should it be legal to create malware? And what if you never actually used the malware? It's going to be your first question there. So read the article and just give us your answer here of, do you think it should be legal to create that malware? Technically, we have labs where we create malware, but is it legal to actually just create malware even if you never actually use it? The second question that we ask here is, should a judge consider the good deeds a hacker has done when committing a crime? So basically, when this judge had sentenced Marcus, he took into account things that have happened in the past, And so, should that be considered? So read through that, tell us what you think, relate it to Hutchinson if you like, but answer that question. And then that third question there is basically, how do you see this? Basically, how would you implement this in your classroom? How do you foresee that? So, if you were to take one of these case studies and bring it back to your classroom, how would you bring it back to your classroom? So that's gonna kind of be the third one there. But just a quick introduction to these case studies. Answer those 3 short response questions, and that's going to be it for this. Let's go back, Bartles, and see if that 147741 is dropped. It still has not yet. These machines taking their time today, I guess. So kind of what we're working with here. So it's 70% the way through that, um, going through it, which is fine. But answer those case study questions and then come back and see if it's done. You should see that fall, but clearly at this point it hasn't yet, Bartles. So that's okay with it. So I'll pass it back to Bartles, and we're gonna go into our last lab, and then it's kind of a wrap up from there. So let me stop sharing, Bartles, and I'll pass it back to you.
We'll be running through our SQL injection lab using the tool DVWA. If you notice here, we do have 2 SQL injection labs, one written for this intentionally vulnerable web application called DVWA. We have another one written for a different intentionally vulnerable web application called Juice Shop. But for this one, we'll be using this DVWA tool that's already installed on the Kali Linux machine. I am going to still give this a little bit of time here to see if maybe we can get 147741 to fall. While this is still running a bit, what Joe showed was one of the ways to switch back and forth between the Kali Linux machine and the Windows 7 machine with that other machines button. One thing that I like to do is actually just have a second tab open where one of the tabs has the Kali Linux machine and another tab has the Windows 7 machine. If you right-click your tab, and you may notice that when Joe was showcasing, he was in Google Chrome. Firefox works the same way. I'm using a web browser called Opera GX. They all kind of behave the same, where you can right-click the tab and click Duplicate tab. What's going to happen here when I click this Duplicate, in this new tab, it gets me back to that Classrooms page where I can then open up the Windows 7. It will disconnect here. It gets a little weird with trying to duplicate if you're already in a virtual machine. So I just closed that to get back to the Kali Linux machine here. One more thing I will specify before moving on to the SQL injection lab. I'd mentioned the JTR tool can be used both maliciously and ethically. As a malicious actor, if I got a hold of a password database that I shouldn't have a hold of, whether I was the one who manually got that or maybe someone else did it, dropped it on the dark web, and I paid $500 for that database, I could try these credentials in different locations to see if maybe I could get access to a Facebook account, maybe a bank account, maybe something else besides just whatever the password database happened to be for. As IT, what I could do is reach out to my employees, Joe, John, Linda, and Charlene, and say, hey, your passwords are not secure. I might even just say what the password is. Say, this is what makes a strong password. Length, complexity. So complexity meaning uppercase and lowercase letters, numbers, and symbols. So having Star Wars, having Harry Potter, having Joe, having John 12. These are not strong passwords because they fell very quickly. And they fell on essentially hardware that's running on laptops that would be older than your students. I mean, that's how kind of weak this hardware is that we're running on. Modern machines with more RAM, stronger CPUs, this would move by much quicker. We do happen to see that proceeding with incremental ASCII. So very, very soon, we'll see that 147741 fall. But rather than wait for this and close this out, we will just let this terminal run in the background here and allow that to do its thing. We'll open a second terminal instead. So allow this to continue to run. Click the terminal button again. And as soon as I did that, we saw the 147741 fall. So we've got all of these passwords that will fall in the time we allow it. Again, in the real world, that password in LeetSpeak would fall within a second. if the settings were a little different and it was using modern hardware. The way that this is structured on this machine, that won't fall. But this third portion, this incremental ASCII, is brute force. So it's literally testing every possible combination out there, not in the sense of A, then B, then C, then D, then A, B. It has an algorithm that it goes through. And with that algorithm, we know 147741 will fall, which is why we choose that as one of the passwords. So in the second terminal here, what we need to do to get access to this DVWA tool is to fire up our web servers where this is hosted. Once we get that launched, we're going to go play the, well, not the role of the victim. We're going to go to the Windows 7 machine and log into this DVWA. In the majority of labs that utilize both Kali Linux and Windows 7, the Windows 7 plays the role of the victim, whereas the Kali Linux machine will play the role as the malicious actor. In this case, the Windows machine is actually going to be playing the role of the malicious actor because it's going to be attacking the vulnerabilities on DVWA that are hosted on the Kali Linux machine. So different labs let us see different things on the Kali machine that the Windows shouldn't have access to. So getting started, to fire up those web servers, we need to run the command sudo root opt lamp with 2 P's, XAMPP, that's XAMPP with an X and 2 P's, and start. If you hadn't shut down the SE toolkit with that Control-C command, we'd have an issue here where we just couldn't get the Apache server to run the way we want it to run because Apache's used in SE toolkit. If you're having an error where it just doesn't seem to want to fire up properly, you can shut down, you can terminate your Kali Linux machine and then launch a new one and then start with this lab itself. That'll terminate the active Apache server. That'll give you a clean install of Kali Linux. And then as soon as you run the sudo root opt lamp XAMPP start, everything will run fine. And you may only see 2 of these saying starting. The 2 that appear when you start from scratch are the only 2 that you need. We don't actually need the third one. We'll move over to the Windows machine, and we can see I'm still in that Google login that Joe had opened for us on Google Chrome here. We can use this in Google. We can use this in Internet Explorer. But what we want to do is navigate to the IP address of your Kali Linux machine, followed by a /DVWA. One of the things that I like having that second tab here is in the tab itself, it includes the IP address. So rather than me having to write it down or having to click other machines, I can just visually see what my Kali Linux IP address is. So 10.15.9.150, and it was still saved from Joe doing the SE toolkit, the credential harvester there. Make sure you're using your Kali IP address, followed by a /DVWA. We hit enter, and we're redirected to this login page. The username and password is simply admin password. All lowercase, admin password. I click login. You can choose to save the password. It doesn't matter. I just exited out of that. I'm not going to say what DVWA stands for, but we can see that in front of us because it does use what could be viewed as an inappropriate term here. But we can see all the different things that are built into this web application. We've got a brute force tab. We have this command injection tab, CSRF, so cross-site request forgery. We see that SQL injection, which we'll be looking at in a bit. And if I scroll down a bit, I notice this DVWA security. By default, we have this set up to be set as impossible. So the highest security settings that we can have. We want to change that. So click the DVWA security tab. We see this say impossible. So I'm going to click that drop down from impossible, switch that to low, and click submit. On DVWA, make sure you're clicking the buttons because enter doesn't quite function the way we're used to it in a lot of web applications. So make sure you're specifically clicking the submit button. And I see it say security level is currently low. So again, this is the SQL Injection lab using DVWA. So I will click the SQL Injection button to the left here. The way that this should behave, if in this user ID section, I search for a user ID number like 4 and click submit. It goes through the SQL database and it displays the first name and surname of the user whose ID number is 4. So in this case, that's Pablo Picasso. I can search for user ID of 1. I see admin. That's how this should be behaving. So even if the security settings were still at impossible, that's how this should be functioning. If you'd happen to look at the way the code works, how it accepts that command, it's got an apostrophe, it waits for the command, and then it closes that out with another apostrophe. It's like an open parentheses, like an open apostrophe, and like a closed parentheses, like a close apostrophe. It waits for an input. You click submit, and as long as it receives something that makes sense to it, it displays this information. Since we changed the security settings to low, what's going to happen is if we try to tack on an additional SQL command, we might get some behavior that we shouldn't be able to get. So again, this is recognizing that it's starting with an apostrophe. It's looking for some sort of SQL command. So I'll type a 1 and an apostrophe, space, or, and I believe we can use a lowercase or, but I'm using a capital or here, space, an apostrophe again, 1 apostrophe, equals, now let me have a space after that. So space equals, space, apostrophe, 1. And I'm not tacking on an apostrophe at that end because, again, remember the way that it's looking for an input here is it already starts with an apostrophe and it ends with an apostrophe. If I click submit here, notice what happens. It doesn't just list admin from the 1. It also lists, we see the Pablo Picasso when we had entered ID number 4. It gives us what's actually ID number 2 with Gordon Brown, ID number 3 with Hackme, ID number 5 with this Bob Smith. So why exactly is it giving us all this information? Well, instead of searching for just the ID number, we're now comparing each user ID to the statement 1 or 1 equals 1. Think about logic statements, Booleans with trues and false. If I have an or statement and either one or the other is true, the whole statement is viewed as a true statement. I like to give the analogy of me asking for cake or ice cream for dessert. If I'm given cake, I'm happy. If I'm given ice cream, I'm happy. If I'm given both cake and ice cream, I'm happy. If I'm given broccoli, I'm not happy. As long as one or the other is true, the whole statement is viewed as true. So in this case, for the very first, for the admin, yes, 1 is true, but also the second part, 1 equals 1, is also true, which is why admin is displayed. For the second user, whose user ID is 2, well, it doesn't equal 1, that's false. But we still have that or 1 equals 1 statement, which is true, which is why the information for user 2 is displayed with Gordon Brown. The same for user 3 with Hackme, the same for user 4 with Pablo Picasso. So knowing this information, okay, it's allowing me to inject a little bit of SQL. How much more can I inject? What other information can I get here? Really what we should check to see is the structure. Maybe we can figure out exactly how the target database is structured and use that information to try different SQL commands. So we'll still have this 1 apostrophe to start off, another space or another space, 1 equals 1. And now we're going to include this union select. So union select, we've got in capitals, we have null, all lowercase, a comma, database, both an open and a closed parentheses, and then an octothorpe. That's the actual name for what we might know as the pound button or hashtag if we're thinking Twitter or X. I know it's hard to see that whole command here. That is on slide 12 of the PowerPoint. That union select null, and then the database, open and close parentheses, and octothorpe. I click submit here. I get more information. I have all that same information from the admin, the Gordon Brown, all of those first 5 users. I also see an extra set of information down here with this surname DVWA. It tells us something about the structure of this target database, and so we can start to feel our way around the database to try to make sense of it. You could run through slides 13 and 14. We're actually going to jump to slide 15 itself and look at a different input here. Again, still starting off with the 1 apostrophe. In this case, I'm going to only target the first user here. So an and instead of an or, 1 equals 1, union select null. Let's make sure I spell that correctly. Union select null, a comma, and cat. Open up a set of parentheses here, password, close that parentheses, from users, and then again, octothorpe. The more SQL that you know, the more you can kind of feel around here, but we've got these commands in the lab itself. So if you aren't that familiar with the SQL language at all, SQL queries, SQL databases, that's okay. You can just use the specific commands that are in the PowerPoint themselves. So I've got all this, assuming I don't have any typos, and I caught the only one that I did have. I click submit. And notice here, I get some information. I still see the admin. For these others, I'm starting to notice additional information. I've got what looks like random strings of characters. Think about what we just did with the brute force offline lab. That looks like a hash, and that's exactly what that happens to be. That is the hashed passwords there. So what could be done with hashed passwords? We don't know the passwords themselves, but we could use a tool like JTR if we happen to have more information. We could try to figure out what the passwords for these users happen to be. There's more information on slide 15. There is a command to list all the passwords with the names themselves. There's another command where you can try to format the data better. We're not going to go that in detail here. The request is to run through slide 16, which has a command, just a single command here. And once you've run that command, we want you to send a screenshot of that. So the command there has that union select null, and then it wants you to load a file, the password file, on the Kali Linux machine. And if you're still running this, if it's the same Kali Linux machine, it hadn't been terminated and relaunched, you should capture information showing Joe, John, or whatever usernames you had, Charlene, Linda, Brandon, and Willie. With SQL injection, we talked about the change of security level. There's an actual term that goes there from changing from low to impossible. It's called sanitizing your inputs. So the way that this should behave if it were secure, it would reject inputs that are not what the search was meant for. So it should only be accepting a numeral because it's checking for the user ID number. As soon as it saw that apostrophe, it should have rejected my input. changing it to low, it didn't reject that. It did not sanitize those inputs. That's why I was able to get more information using SQL injection. You should never just trust user input. Make sure it's only specifically what you're looking for. With that, Joe, I'll pass it back to you so we can get wrapped up.
Yeah, so wrapping this up, so on my screen here, I mean, this is just the in the intro slide again. We're pretty much done here. I think the last question on that Google form that you have is just talking about what you're most excited about bringing potentially from this course back to your classroom. Excuse me, whether it be the range, a case study, a lab, the course, just the lessons, anything that you want here with that. So any question about this, here's our emails again, joe.mcgam@cyber.org and jonathan.bartles@cyber.org. Feel free to reach out via email, and we'll be able to answer any and all questions right away. Let us know. But last thing, so just make sure to submit that Google form. But there is the survey link at that bottom of that form. So before you hit that submit, open up that survey and fill it out too. So the I guess the three things to make sure that you get PD credit for this is going to be make sure you register on Eventbrite. Um, Fill out that Google form and then also that survey as well. So fill out those three things and you'll get credit once for attending this PD once the session ends that we're running this session. I think the first one runs a month and a half. We might run some longer than that. So however long this specific session goes for, at the end of that is when you'll receive that credit. So any questions, reach out to us, but just make sure to submit that Google form and then also fill out that survey. So we'll stop here. Hope you enjoyed the workshop. Let us know in that survey and we take that and it'll build up future workshops in the future. So make sure to give us feedback, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So pleasure working with y'all. Like I said, let us know if you have any questions whatsoever. So.